Hello, fellow cultivators of curiosity. I'm Kevin Falk, your guide through the captivating universe where seeds, genes, and everything in between converge. Whether you're out in the field, orchestrating a symphony of pollen in the nursery, or decoding secrets in the genetics lab, you've stepped into the epicenter of scientific discovery. In today's episode, Dr. Istvan Rajcan is ready to unveil the scientific mysteries of his journey. Istvan, welcome here.
Hi, Kevin.
Good.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Good to see you too. Maybe we'll start with an introduction. And I went onto the Guelph website and pulled your bio, but I'd rather how about just have you tell everyone the story of who you are and how you arrived in the industry and in your current position.
Yeah, for sure. My pleasure. So I was born and raised in what was then the former Yugoslavia. The part I come from, that country actually became 7 different countries after the Civil War in the early 90s. So the part I come from is Serbia, and I come from the northern part of Serbia, which is a province of Vojvodina. So that's close to the Hungarian border. So my name, if anyone asked you what Istvan means, it's the same as Stephen in English. So it's a Hungarian version. And my ethnic background is Hungarian, but I grew up in the city of Novi Sad, which is in northern Serbia. And I went to school there and I finished my bachelor's degree in agriculture at the University of Novi Sad many years ago. And after that, I had an opportunity to go and work as a research assistant in sunflower breeding and genetics. So they have a pretty good institute of field and vegetable crops that was at the time, I think, associated with the University of Novi Sad, but it became a separate entity. And I worked as a research assistant in sunflower breeding and got my hands or my feet wet in plant breeding for the first time at that time. And I had a great mentor in sunflower breeding who taught me about the profession of plant breeding. And I worked there for 2.5 years until the war in Yugoslavia unfortunately broke out in 1991. And then basically I emigrated to Canada in 91. So it's been a long time living here. And so my wife and I went to grad school at the University of Guelph, completing our PhD degrees. Mine was in canola breeding and genetics. So I switched from one oilseed crop to another, to sunflower breeding, and I enjoyed that switch. Very few people were interested in sunflower when I arrived, so I couldn't directly use my background in sunflower breeding. There was a little bit of sunflower grown in Manitoba. There may still be some, but it's not a huge crop in Canada. It is bigger in the US and many other places in the world. But canola was big, and there was a professor who had a position for a graduate student, and he hired me first as a master's student, and then I transferred to a PhD. So I never completed a master's. I went straight for the PhD in canola breeding and genetics. Then I moved out west in 96. I got a job with Saskatchewan Wheat Pool as a canola breeder in Saskatoon. So I lived there for a couple of years, working as a private canola breeder, which experience has helped me tremendously in the rest of my career, which was academic, in that I was on the other side, on the private seed company side, and I could understand the way that the private seed industry is thinking, as opposed to the public scientists and academics. That helped me a lot with various grant proposals and such. So we lived in Saskatoon for a couple of years, but I was truly attracted by academia. And in 98, I got this current job, first as assistant professor in soybean breeding. So that was my third and maybe my last oilseed crop. So I went from sunflower to canola to soybean, and the last almost 26 years, it's been soybean breeding and genetics. So that's kind of a brief history of my path in plant breeding.
Well, not only in in Southern Ontario do fit in well, but with that trifoliate would fit in great in Southern Manitoba, because here we grow all very, very common. Probably sunflower to the lesser degree, but canola and soybeans have come on really strong in the last 5 or 10 years, and sunflower is still kicking around. So great. You'd be very, very welcome here. So you recently published, or was one of the authors publishing a paper describing the history and design of your soybean breeding program there in Guelph. Yes. I'm curious how the advances over the past, I guess, 6 decades helped reduce time and cost and increase selection accuracy in your program.
Sure. Well, I was very fortunate in that when I was hired in '98, there was a pretty solid soybean breeding program here at the University of Guelph in place that had been churning out good soybean cultivars for many years. So, and I also was fortunate to inherit excellent, well-trained technicians. So I didn't have to start from scratch. So then, but at the same time, at that time, the program was set up only for classical breeding, and there was absolutely no molecular component. And with my background and training in molecular biology, I wanted to add the molecular aspects to my program, especially molecular markers that I really like to use. So that part, the molecular lab was built during my time. And I've had a number of students who worked. One of my long-term interests has been seed composition, changing the various compounds and reducing some compounds, such as fatty acids, for example, linolenic, reducing that, or palmitic acid, or increasing isoflavones for health benefits, anti-cancerous properties and such. So there was another component that we added was using more biochemistry and analysis of seeds, using different methods to actually follow the genetics of those various compounds in the seed. That was added, and also my predecessors did not spend as much time on disease resistance. And my first training in sunflower back in Serbia was in a white mold of sunflowers that, is a disease which affects over 400 different species. So I already had experience in disease resistance breeding from my sunflower work. And then I brought that experience and expertise into the soybean program. And, at any given time in the last 6 years that I've been here, I had at least one graduate student who worked on disease resistance. In the case of soybean, it's soybean cyst nematode is the biggest one, and then followed by, at least in Ontario, by Phytophthora root rot and white mold, Sclerotinia stem rot. And then there's a range of other diseases. Sudden death syndrome has become an issue in Ontario. It didn't used to be, but it's crept its way up from the US, just like all the other diseases that we tend to bring across the border into Ontario. So all those aspects have influenced my path. And then more recently, the development of various omics approaches that we covered in the paper you mentioned in the Canadian Journal of Plant Science. That also is more kind of our attempt to provide a perspective of where the plant breeding is going. This is where we have been over the last 6 decades, developing varieties, using the winter nurseries to save 2 years per cross, 2 years to develop a variety. We save by growing 2 generations of single seed descent in Costa Rica. That's something we've been doing for many years, and we are not unique. I know the private industry is doing the same, single seed descent, whether they use Puerto Rico or Mexico or something else. We are quite happy with Costa Rica. So that's also another aspect that we are doing to improve the efficiency. And more recently, it's been the use of genomic selection that in our hands is equivalent, or if not better than phenotypic selection. So we have been using genomic selection as well as more recently genomic prediction of successful crosses using molecular tools. So those are some of the new areas of development and technology that we've been using. I used to have a part of the program that was devoted to traded variety development, GM crops, and I dropped that about 10 years ago. There's just so much competition from the private industry. There's no point in us trying to compete. We made a decision, a conscious decision to let the private industry develop those cultivars and market them. And we decided to focus on food grade, non-GM, where there is much fewer players in the private industry than in the public. So we kind of made a decision. Let's do what we do best as we can, and let others who are better at the GM technology do their part.
Made a similar decision to my PhD advisor, who
right.
Danny Singh, who you know back from his Guelph days, right? He did his PhD in Guelph as well, and he made a similar pivot to focus on food grade non-GM soybeans. And so, yeah, basically after a similar market, obviously in different geographies. You speak a lot about different technology that you've used and how things have evolved, first from molecular breeding and implementing that in the program, and then talking about shuttle breeding and reducing the time of years to get there, and then evolving that into more quantitative genetics or marker selection based or genomic prediction. So with that in mind, as we look forward in the future plant breeding, what now emerging trends or innovations do you find particularly intriguing, or are you still trying to digest these new trends that we just spoke of?
Yeah, great question. I'd say we could call it digesting the current but recent technologies is part of it. More so finding ways to use more of it. Then I'm already convinced in the utility and usefulness of those technologies. It's just it's often a matter of how much resources do I have to allocate to this, because everything costs money. Some of my colleagues described a faculty job as an internal grant writer, and I would agree. We constantly have to write grants to fund our research, and it's there are times when I don't feel like writing a grant, but I have to. If I want to do anything, it will have to be paid for, and that's why we are constantly writing grants. So, but as far as what's next, what I haven't used as much is the high throughput phenotyping technologies. Unfortunately, I'm not set up for it. I don't have drones in my program that I could use. I'm trying to bring that to my program, because what I've seen in the published literature is that the high throughput phenotyping is as good as genomic selection, if not better in some cases. And I've heard cases in wheat and corn where that's quite a useful technology. So I'd like to use more of that, and I may actually have a student who is in the private industry. I won't name the company, but they may come as a part-time PhD student to my program to actually bring that aspect, because they have the technology in their company. They could use it, and that could become part of my program by training this student to also allow myself to assess that technology and make decisions on whether to implement it more broadly in my program. So that's one, high throughput phenotyping. I'm interested in that, and especially in learning and using more of it. And then gene editing. I mean, gene editing is attractive. I currently don't have any gene editing projects in the lab for a very simple reason. I have to think and be aware of the markets where soybean cultivars end up. And if those markets are close to gene edited products because they consider them GM, then I am restricting myself in using it. So, however, there are markets where the which are open to that technology, like the U.S. and I'm currently working with one U.S. company and potentially will work with another U.S. company that will take our genetics and edit it to produce new cultivars through gene editing. So I'm interested in the concept. I think it holds a great potential. I will not venture into trying to predict how long it will take for places like Europe to adopt these or accept these technology, because people who talked about plant transformation thought it would have happened a long time ago, and it still didn't. so we will see. Time will tell. But I believe in that technology. I think it will. What I don't believe in is a silver bullet solution. I never will believe in that. So I don't think changing one gene will solve all our problems, but it's one at a time. And this technology would allow us to do that.
Yeah, silver bullet solutions. I think that's across the board with many of the technologies that you've spoken about.
Exactly.
From molecular markers to shuttle breeding to genomic selection to high throughput phenotyping, and now GM. Well, I guess both transgenics and gene editing. I think all of these tools are tools in the plant breeder's tool belt, and that's what they are. Is they're tools, and they should be viewed as such. There's never a silver bullet. Say, oh, now we won't need breeders anymore because of this, and that's something that sometimes I deal with. People, because I help develop new technologies. That's what my role is, and often scientists are concerned that this may replace them, but no, it's a tool to help you do your job better, more efficiently, more effectively, and not to replace you and your mind.
Exactly.
So that's,
I agree.
It's interesting though. I as a tech buff, I really enjoy talking about the technology and how things are changing.
For sure.
So on to the next question. Plant breeding has the potential to make a difference. Could you share a story that exemplifies the tangible impact that your work has had?
I would say one of the benefits of having a plant breeding job in general, but specifically being a public plant breeder, is that not only do we have a major component of our job teaching, but we also have the opportunity of not only teaching material from a textbook, but actually applying it, and seeing is believing. Basically, being able to demonstrate the impact of plant breeding in real life situations. Many of my colleagues don't have that opportunity, or may not get enough funding to let's say carry out a basic plant physiology experiment, or to see the results of their work being rewarded in real life. We as plant breeders or plant breeding faculty do. So, and that's been one of the best parts of my job, in that we actually have an active plant breeding program that churns out cultivars. I love speaking to farmers. Every opportunity I have to go to a field day or a farm meeting, I take it, because I find I learn from them a lot, and they are good at sharing their knowledge, and I want to hear both the good and the bad. And they could come and say, I grew this variety, it's great, but in a wet year, it's susceptible to white mold or something like that. And then it gives me ideas how can I improve my breeding program. So going back to your original question, what has been the greatest impact of my work? In my view, it's the ability to develop cultivars that Ontario farmers grow, and they seem happy to grow. And there's always new cultivars coming to the market. Some of them stay long. 10 years or 20 years. Those are rare cases, but many of them stay in the market for 3 to 5 years. And we are always striving to replace them with something that's better. So speaking to farmers who are in reality our customers and hearing from them about the successes or failures of our cultivars has been a rewarding experience for me.
So how is teaching new plant breeding students changed from when you started? You said in 98 till now, so you've been there for 25 years. Right. How has it changed from your first master's student or PhD student to how it is today?
When I came to Guelph, I had zero teaching experience. So I really started from scratch. I wasn't even a TA in a course. So I'm still baffled why they hired me, but they did. So I just decided to take the bull by the horns and just learn as much as I could, as quickly as I could. And I really tried for a number of years. I still do that, listening to the feedback on course evaluations, so on what works, what doesn't work. And I've made numerous adjustments to my teaching style, realizing that everybody has a different way of learning. There are maybe some patterns for certain groups of people, but applying one teaching style to everybody, there's always going to be somebody who doesn't, like that teaching style, and there will be others who love it. No matter what you choose, there's always going to be, both groups and many in the middle. And so then I made a decision. If the majority of the students that I teach get the material and understand it and appreciate it and find it interesting, I'm winning. If a few of them don't, I may never gain their confidence, but the majority of them should be able to understand, and that's what I've been seeing in the course evaluations, and that's what keeps me going. So as far as training graduate students, what I've learned is every graduate student is a different story, and you can't apply. Here's a policy, here's a protocol how I'm going to deal with or work with a particular graduate student. One graduate student works in one way, another one in another way, and rather than stifling them and making them fit into a mold that I think should be applied to everybody, I try to let them develop on their own, using their strengths and capitalizing on their strengths rather than trying to fix their weaknesses. Because by emphasizing their strengths, they're actually becoming a better student and learning more than by me trying to force them to do something they don't feel they should be doing. So that's been like giving them freedom at the same time, making sure that they follow the path properly and they're making progress instead of falling back. I never liked people looking over my shoulder. I still don't. So I try not to do that to my students. But if I'm not hearing from somebody for a while, then I would reach out and say, how are things going? And I always developed and nurtured this habit of having informal discussions with my students. I want to keep them at ease when they talk to me, to never be afraid of me when they have something to say, because that's my role is not to intimidate. My role is to support and guide. And as long as I'm successful in that, everybody benefits, both the students and I. And I don't like my students taking too long or going over time, so I encourage them to finish on time. And there's always a fine balance between encouragement and pushing somebody. So I don't want to push them. I want to encourage them so they feel comfortable and supported, but they also know that there are tasks to be done. That's what I've learned in my years of mentoring students.
Excellent. Have most of the students that you've had, graduate students, went on for public breeding positions or private, or have they moved into other industries? What is, from
Sure.
your perspective,
Mhm.
how have they changed, or where do they end up?
Yeah, great question. Well, the majority of the plant breeding jobs or related jobs are in the private sector. There's no doubt about that. That's where most of the money is, and so it's no secret or surprise that probably about 2/3 of my students ended up in the private seed industry, if not three-quarters. So many are employed by the big seed companies, Corteva, Syngenta, Bayer, and others. Some of them are local Ontario companies and so on. So the majority of them end up in the private seed industry, and they're quite happy with that. I was in the private seed industry. I was treated well, but I felt myself that I could probably contribute more if I train others. Then, I was a little bit bothered by the nature of private seed industry being, profit driven. I did not like that too much, and also the secrecy, the inability to speak to my colleagues freely about what I do, which I love to do. But I always tell my students that was my experience. You go in and build your own experience. And many of them are quite happily employed by the private industry. They like what they do. They're treated well, paid well, and they stay there. Many of them stay there for a lifetime. So there's this other smaller group that ended up working in the public institutions. And there's also an even smaller group that completely changed their profession. For example, you being in Canada, you're familiar with Statistics Canada. That's a government department that collects the statistical data for many things in the country. I have one master's and one PhD student who work for Stats Canada in Ottawa, and so I'm proud of them because the fact that they are working in the statistics department of the federal government tells me that they got enough stats background and training to be able to do that. And then I have one former student who is a manager in a construction company, and she told me it's actually they build tools, construction tools, and she's quite a successful manager. And she said she learned the leadership and everything in a project that had nothing to do with that, but she ended up there. So, and then one former master student went to dental school and is a successful dentist now. So, there is a variety. The majority of them end up in plant breeding or related fields, but some of them choose to change their professional path and go somewhere else.
Yeah, I have a couple of points.
Uh-huh.
Working in the private industry now, I share some of your feelings with the inability to talk with colleagues about my research and not able to publish the research and kind of share the excitement of what I'm doing, because I feel a lot of what I do is really cool, really exciting. And I wish I could have those more of those conversations, especially in an age where social media and freedom of information is the norm. To have to hold back and not have those conversations is one of my frustrations. Other than that, I don't have like the other points that I often hear about working with private industry. I don't really have those qualms with them. Like, I'm very free with my research. I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm fairly free, but maybe I'm a bit of a special case in that. but it is good. And then you spoke a little bit about how you've got a student that's not even in agriculture anymore, and maybe the StatsCan people are not in agriculture. I'm sure they maybe dabble a little bit with some of the StatsCan ag information that we do get. If you weren't in plant breeding or in agriculture, what do you think you'd be doing?
If I wasn't in plant breeding?
Yeah.
You might be very surprised to hear that. But if I didn't become a plant breeder, I would have probably become a daycare teacher. So because I've always loved children, I really like children. I'm so lucky to have two daughters and three grandkids, and I love spending time with children. I connect with them easily. So I don't think anyone would have expected me to say this, but
Mm,
yeah, anything to do with children is something that always excited me.
excellent. I'm very I am a little surprised, to be honest. I love kids
Yeah,
too. I've got two of my own now
right.
and a third on the way, and we're really excited about that. But yeah, I've
Congratulations.
definitely, thank you. Definitely turned my I wouldn't say my personality's changed, but I'm much more open to my kids and teaching them, and
Yeah.
whether we're fostering our offspring in the field, as
Yes.
in you're crossing parents and looking at your F1s and F2s, or if you're fostering your own
Yes.
children, really
Yeah.
it's all the same as plant breeders, right?
Exactly.
And yeah, I joke with my wife with our kids and how we're going. I mean, I like, look at their traits, their
Hmm.
phenotypic traits that I can see and try to pick up where they came from and
Hmm.
how there's interaction between my wife and my traits, because we're
Hmm.
definitely two very different people. So it's interesting to see that and pull from my experience.
For sure.
So, looking at your career and your experience, what are some or one of the most exciting moments or, big moments that you've had in your career, and how did they shape you as a scientist now?
Yeah. So I like to draw on my mentors, and I've had many over the years, starting with professors in my undergrad program at the University of Novi Sad in Serbia, all the way to the end of the PhD program, as well as mentors through work. So one thing that comes to mind is I had two co-advisors for my PhD in canola breeding. One was Dr. Wally Beversdorf, and the other one was Dr. Ken Kasha. And what I learned from Wally, he was actually the one who encouraged me to transfer to a PhD. I wasn't sure whether I should go master's first and then PhD second. He basically drew a plot in terms of career path and including salary and impact and everything. And he kind of convinced me that it was a good idea. If my final goal was the PhD, that I should go for that. But beside that, what I learned from him and used multiple times is he told me if you have a good idea, research idea, um, and there's no one else is doing that. Try to produce some preliminary data and then apply for funding. And don't be discouraged if you turn down. People are generally resistant to change. But if you truly believe in that idea, produce a little bit of data, present it, and apply, and funding will come. And that's happened to me many times. Initially, your proposal can be turned down because it's too novel or people don't believe that you can do it, and then you say, okay, so I have a little bit of preliminary data and it seems to be working, but I need more to actually prove the concept. So that's something I learned. In believing in yourself and your ideas, and if they're wrong, time will tell. It's also not a great idea to be stubborn when if my idea was turned down 5 times in a row or 10 times, maybe it's time to move on. But at the first attempt, it's good not to get discouraged too early. So that's made a big impact on me in my career. Second thing that I learned also from the same individual, same co-advisor, he told me when I started writing my PhD, he said, produce all your tables in free figures and then write an abstract. And I went, whoa, what do you mean? Write an abstract after seeing the data and not knowing where the paper is going? He said, yes, try that and see how it works. And, I've used that and given the same advice to my students. And you would be surprised how well it works, because the abstract actually gives you a guide where you were going with the whole chapter or a whole manuscript. And then you can fill the gaps, write the results and discussion and everything else. But, you look at the data and then you understand, and interpret what the data is telling you. And then you write an abstract, almost like a recipe where you want to go with the paper. So that's something that was surprising to me when I first heard it, and I've used it many times, and it seems to work. Maybe not for everybody, but it works for me and many of my students.
To use that, I've often done the tables and figures advice, but never the tables and figures in abstract, and having that abstract as a guide and a goal. And like many people probably do this thing, and I end up finding my way through the forest, through taking every path possible before getting out of the forest, whereas an abstract would probably help keep you on the one true path.
That's the purpose of it.
Very good. Yeah, that's good advice.
Thank you.
So collaboration seems to be a cornerstone of success in plan breeding, at least in what I've seen and what I see every day. Could you share a collaborative project or experience that has helped you in your science, or helped you personally, or your growth as a scientist?
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be a pleasure. There have been a number of collaborations that I could speak about. I will just mention a couple. One was many years ago, one of my colleagues from Rajcan campus, he passed away, but at the time he went in '99, he went to China, brought a whole bunch of Chinese cultivars that he got as a gift, the seeds of which he got as a gift. And, I decided to start making crosses with those Chinese cultivars right away without even testing them, because I thought, well, they have a whole lot more diversity in the center of origin for soybean than we do in North America. So let's see what we can get. And that has resulted in future collaborations with 3 different institutes, universities in China, where we were testing biparental populations between the 2 countries and looking at adaptation to mega environments, understanding even when there's a soybean with the same maturity group in one country versus another, it doesn't perform the same way, because the maturity is one thing, but it's not everything, and there's many other stresses that affect the plant development and growth and yield. So that's been very fruitful. And then over the years, we added another component where we used Ontario as one mega environment, Northeast China is another mega environment, and then I had a collaborator at the University of Minnesota who was testing the same populations in Minnesota. He's now retired, Jim Orff, but his position is now held by Aaron Lorenz. So that was a very a pleasant and fruitful collaboration. And more recently, I've had the pleasure of sharing 2 different Genome Canada grants with researchers from the University of Laval University in Quebec City. And that's been a true pleasure, because I really like working with colleagues from Laval. The project is actually national in scope, so it goes from Saskatchewan to Quebec, includes Ontario. Unfortunately, I don't think we have anyone from Manitoba, so for some weird reason we skipped Manitoba. But there are researchers from multiple provinces involved, and we have annual meeting always in December in Quebec City, and the exchange of ideas, brainstorming together, publishing together, applying for grants has been very gratifying in that project with Laval, led by Laval University. Francois Belzile is the lead on the project. So that's been a true pleasure.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Well, before I let you go, I see there's a map behind you on your filing cabinet, and it looks a little bit weird. Is that like Pangea, or can you tell me a little bit about that map?
It's actually a map of the world. It might be too small. It is a normal map of the world with all the continents that are kind of golden in color. And I got that
Okay.
as a gift, and I'm yet to use it properly. So the map is, you can take a coin and just scratch it for the countries that you have visited in the world. So I need to do that at some point, because that list of countries that I've visited keeps growing. And thank you for reminding me. I will do that. So it's just for fun.
Oh, I mean, I saw it. I'm just like it didn't look to be exactly the shape it
No,
should be.
it's really
So I
like
thought there must be something going
Asia,
on there.
Africa. Yeah, okay. Well, for some reason they made the same color for the Mediterranean Sea, so it looks like those two continents, Africa
Right.
and Asia, are joined, but they're
Yeah.
really not. When you look up close, you can see the borders of the countries and all that.
So the next time you go on a cruise in the Mediterranean, you can scratch off the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
As I'm sure I mean, growing up in Serbia, you're right there. I'm sure
Yes.
you've
Oh,
spent
we
time
go
in
to
the
Croatia
Mediterranean.
often for this. Yeah, it's great.
Excellent. Well, that's time. That's all we have the time for today with
Excellent.
the
Appreciate it.
NAPB Education Podcast. But thank you for taking time
Very
out of
welcome.
your day, Dr. Istvan Rajcan, and visiting with me. And I
My
hope to
pleasure.
see you at future NAPB meetings.
I hope
when we
so
can get
too.
together
Unfortunately, I missed the one at Clemson last year because of some flight issues, but I think this year, is it in St. Louis? Yeah, I'm hoping to go. I will
Excellent.
likely go, and I hope to see you there.
Excellent. I hope to see you there
thanks.
too. All right.
Take care and have a
Istvan.
good year. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.